Hey, welcome, my friends. Here we are. Today's date, 8th of January 2025. Welcome. Happy New Year. I didn't do last week because it was New Year's Day and I just couldn't be bothered really. I didn't do the week before because it was Christmas Day. So yeah, I've had a couple of weeks off doing chat with Matt, but here we are today. And I guess as happens when you don't do it for a couple of weeks, I have no, I think I've now lost it. What I need to go here. I don't think I've got anything written in ahead of time. I did put the thing out last night when I checked first thing this morning before my practice. There were no comments, and there's still no comments. So I'm free to talk about whatever anyone might like to talk about. So when you jump on, you won't have heard this. So Georgie, hello Georgie, has heard me say it. Feel free to write something in, and we can talk about it, discuss it, chat about it. Doesn't have to be a question, it can be a statement, comment, etc. Okay, Georgie said hello and I didn't see it on my screen, so I've just got to do this thing where I swipe backwards and forwards and hopefully it starts showing me things up here, because this is where I focus on, not down here. Otherwise it looks really crazy if I'm not looking relatively at the camera while I'm talking. So what's going on, friends? It's been pretty, it was a pretty full-on New Year with the new moon just before it, stirring up some stuff. And then we had all of those solar flares and mass coronal ejections, or coronal mass ejections, I think is the correct way of saying it, sending a whole heap of solar energy at us. Matt, I'm about to see my dad. He has dementia. That's hard, Georgie. I know it's not very uncommon either these days. Dementia seems to be reasonably high up. He cried for the first time ever, the first time you can ever remember anyway. I'm sure he has cried at other times when he was younger, but yes, part of that dementia journey is returning to a more childlike state of being, and the mind is releasing its grip, which in many ways can be somewhat useful for the experiencer to be once again allowed to feel emotion, but very difficult for those to witness the transformation occurring as the mind ceases to be the pinnacle of the persona that it is for most of us, most of our lives. For better or worse, we can definitely argue whether it's a good thing that our minds are so staunch and identified with who we be, and this persona that we create around us, this role that we play, and various identifications and labels that we take on, and then maintain quite doggedly, maintaining our labels, our strengths, and trying to avoid our weaknesses being exposed, etc., right? We put a lot of effort into maintaining our persona and our expected state of being in the world that others see, our face, right? We put a lot of effort into maintaining this face of who we show up as. And then something like dementia, etc., comes along, and that is stripped away, which is difficult, especially for those observing the situation, I think, more than the participant of the experience, although I'm not sure. I would assume at first the participant is relatively distraught, as the realization that they're fluxing in and out of control of their sense of self is happening. That would be very scary, I would imagine, for most people. And that's why you hear of, I guess, this phase of dementia or Alzheimer's where the participant becomes angry and a little bit violent because of this. Well, the anger is the lack of self-control, if you like, or controlling the narrative of who they be, right? They feel unsafe in the world. And then as that subsides, there's more of an acceptance into, you know, a state of being that is freer in some ways, free from having to maintain, you know, there's a surrender. There's realizing that there is no more controlling what the mind is doing and what the mind is projecting. Just for a change, as I've got on this live stream, my nose is itchy and I've got a little bit of phlegm coming. I don't know, it's something about live streams. I'm allergic to live streams. Okay. I think it's there is a film with Anthony Hopkins called The Father. It's very insightful. Yeah, well, Anthony Hopkins is an amazing actor. So I'm sure it's a good film. I haven't seen it, but it's definitely worth noting. Yeah. Awesome. Well, my advice, George, is if you go to your father, the main thing is they can't interact so well intellectually, but they can energetically, right? Energetic sensation or what's the right word, starts with a P? Perception. Energetic perception is probably heightened in my opinion, much like a stroke victim. When the intellectual mind gets out of the way, we are much more capable of feeling in richer depth, richer vibrance. So the advice would be to go with an open heart, right? To really open your heart into a loving space, because he will appreciate that more than likely, and benefit from that opportunity to interact with you being very heart open and accepting of his situation and his state of being, as opposed to being fearful and sad and sympathetic. You know, when you're in a state of being like that, the last thing you really want is everyone to feel sympathetic towards you, because it's quote unquote pathetic. It's a downer when you feel people are coming to come and see you, and then when they get there, they feel sorry for you. It's, in my opinion, it's you know, it's not very uplifting for them. So awesome. Georgie said yes, absolutely. Music is good also. He loves me singing to him. Oh, he loved me singing to him on Christmas Day. Yeah, because he can feel the emotion. He can feel the vibrance in your intent when you give yourself into song, and so that's it. If someone doesn't have the capacity to be very mental, the best thing you can do is park your mind as well, and interact, you know, and so that your mind isn't getting frustrated with the fact that his mind can't interact the way that you quote unquote used to or expect that you should with any person, really. So it is very confronting for us as the observer, as I've said a couple of times now, to witness this state of being where people are alive but not really in mental control. That's very scary for us who have so much invested in our mentality, to recognize that can happen, and it does happen. Doesn't have to become terrifying though if we can manage to use it as inspiration, right? And see the advantages in being less mentally controlling, right? Without having to have some disease that makes it impossible to engage our mind. That's not so appealing, but at least for us to get out of our minds more regularly and to experience what's going on in a more energetic way and a less intellectual, judgmental way, controlled way, is quite a opportunity, really. So I would encourage you to, and everyone else who has this opportunity, to embrace that. We do the same when we're playing with little children. You know, if you come into a room and there's a couple of 2 or 3 year olds, you know, in the room, and you want to engage with them, then you have to park your intellect and get down on the ground with them. It's interesting that most adults, when they want to play with children, always try and turn it into an educational experience where they start telling them the names of things and trying to speed up their mental development. Have you ever noticed that? It's a very interesting thing. That rather than just play with the children at the children's level, they want to try and up level the children. And I get it. Children, you know, are on a path of education, and there's definitely a role there. But some people, it's the only way that they think they can interact with children, right, is to be the teacher and start teaching them the names of things and how to do things and all the rest of it. And kids are great because kids just love learning things. They're like sponges, and so that's one way of engaging with them, and they're generally appreciative to be shown how something works or to learn something new about something. But you can actually play with children just in the joy of the play without it having to be an educational experience. But there's our minds just want to catch them up somehow, you know. I don't know, it's an interesting thing. I don't know if we're jealous that they can be so happy without being mental or what. In general, I don't think it is jealousy. I think it's a difficulty in perceiving that someone can, or something can be so joyfully engaged in life without being mental. And so that's confronting, if anything, for our mentality that's taken such a leading role in directing how our life plays out. Why have I lost the comments? I don't know why it does this sometimes. So, great conversation. Thank you, Georgie, for bringing that up. I think it's worthy for all of us to think about. My nose continues to itch. Yeah, and I think, Georgie, it's also yes, I'm sending you on your way. Much love. But I was just going to say, it's important to be compassionate with yourself as well, and recognize and not make it wrong that you do feel, you know, the sadness and the sorrow that goes with losing your aspects of your dad that you held, you know, dear, and being able to relate to him on levels where you quote unquote used to. It is a form of prolonged grieving, I believe, you know, looking after someone with dementia, or witnessing someone with dementia, whether you're a primary caregiver or not. So, yeah, just be compassionate with yourself and don't make yourself wrong for having difficulty in being able to hold that space, but at the same time, maintain the intention to hold that space where you can interact as best that you can without having to you know, get frustrated with the situation. So yes, I think in general for most of us, this year is going to present us with lots of opportunities to make big transformations in how we perceive the world and how we interact with it. I know we've been going through that for many years now, but I you know, don't think this year is going to be markedly different. And if anything, probably more intense or more obvious, that this transformational train, you know, out of the head and into the heart is really ramping up. And it's going to challenge a lot of us in many different ways to make peace with what is unfolding from our heart space, rather than being able to mentally understand it or mentally frame it even, you know. Many of us are going to feel pushed. Not necessarily that the universe is pushing us, but we're going to feel pushed to to let go of the mental reins somewhat, and to soften around this desire to be able to understand and predict what's going on, and therefore keep ourselves, what we perceive as safe, in this method that we've used for a long time of mental or intellectual understanding and analysis of the world. The world is going to become obviously beyond analysis, I think. Although many people will continue to try, including ourselves, who will continue to try to analyze it. But I think the more that we remember that it's beyond it, the world is beyond analyzing at the moment, the happier we will be. Because as long as we're sort of clinging to the need or the desire to analyze the world in order to think that we can stay safe, the more frustrated and even dismayed we're going to feel as we recognize that we're failing to do so. None of us like to fail. So we're better off setting up the parameters of the game so that we're not expected to do something that we can't. Right? This is the problem. So we've set up, at the moment, the parameters of the game are we should be able to understand the world, and we should be able to predict what's going to happen, so therefore we can control how the world's playing out around us. We can contract people into certain behaviors. We can make people promise that they're going to do this or that, and we can set things up so that we can intellectually relax into expecting that that's how it's going to happen. That's how we've done the world for a great many centuries now. And that's changing. So if we keep expecting to be able to do the world that way, we're going to fail, and that's going to hurt and create stress. So we best stop with that expectation, and set new parameters for how we're going to do the world, and start entertaining the idea that we can intuitively move through the world better. That if we keep our heart open, we will feel what to do, rather than keeping our mind sharp so we're observing everything and figuring out what to do. There's this transformation occurring, and it's not one or the other, of course. It never has been and it never will be, but the balance is shifting back to a more feeling state and away from a intensely intellectual state. Some of the intensity out of the intellect has to be released for our own sense of peace and for our own survival. Really, if you want to make it extreme, those of us who can be more heart-centered are going to survive better chance of surviving this experience. And I don't want you to all think that talking about survival is extremist. We're all going to die at some stage, right? Surviving's only a temporary state. And plenty of people are going to pass through this period of time, as we're already seeing. People choosing to opt out seems to be becoming more and more popular, or prevalent is probably a better word. I don't think it'll ever be popular, but it's definitely quite prevalent at the moment that people are passing from various means. So, but that's, it's not terrible. We have to let go of our fear of death, that death is something really bad. It's not. It's just a transition into a different state of being. The being is still the being, and the being will have the opportunity to transition yet again back into physicality, whether it's here on planet Earth or somewhere else. It's a cycle, and it's not, death isn't terminal, which is hard to remember when we're so fixated on this human body, this vehicle that we're inhabiting, and how, it seems so real for us, so important to us, so all consuming for us. This is all there is for us, when we're in this sort of amnesic state of humanity, bouncing off everyone else who's reflecting that amnesic state to us. And very rarely are we reflecting on the fact that we're a being having a human experience. And that's it. So, don't be scared of death. Well, allow yourself to loosen up on your fear of death. Saying don't be scared of something's ridiculous. It's like telling someone who's got a phobia about heights, just don't be scared. It's it's cruel at best. Well, it's pathetic at best. You know, we have various fears, and you know, you can't just say don't be scared. You can talk in other ways, like, you know, talk to the what's the reality of the situation. It's like, you are not in danger right now. I know you are feeling fear. You know, I have to talk to myself that way quite often when I'm dealing with, you know, stuff like airport security, you know, which still conjures fear response in me, even though I've gone through many, many airports now, and of course that's helping to alleviate it. There is still issues with dealing with authority, because, you know, if I look into my deeper past, I'm not so scared of death, because death has actually been my relief in many lifetimes from what the authorities were doing to me, right? So I've got a much greater fear of authoritarian figures than I have of death, because in the past, the authoritarian figures have been my suffering, and the death has been my relief from that suffering. So not everyone's like me, though, of course, but you know, that just helps me rationalize and make it okay, right? So that I don't feel that I'm insane for being so scared of something that doesn't really warrant being scared of in this lifetime. You know, it's very unlikely that I'm going to be taken by the authorities and tortured like I have been in other lifetimes. Very unlikely. But the trauma response is still in the energy field, and that doesn't just go away. Even when we understand it and the rest of it, it doesn't just go away. But the point is, we can now, with a greater degree of awareness and consciousness, we can choose not to buy into the trauma response or the stress response, right? And we feel the ping of anxiety arise when we're faced with this trigger, but we don't need to allow it to be so real, right? We honor the feeling as a real feeling, right? We're not denying, we're not suppressing, we're just maintaining an empowered attitude or perspective of it. And you can do exactly the same thing with the fear of heights as a more obvious thing, right? If you choose to face it, and you know that theoretically you are safe, even though you are feeling great fear, you can go towards the window, right? And look out of it. It's very unlikely that you're going to get sucked out the window and fall to your death, even though you're feeling a fear response as if that's what is going to happen. But you rationalize with yourself, and it's not that the fears are just going to go away, it's that you are going to be able to handle the fears in a more empowered way. And so it doesn't matter what we are feared of, whether it's public speaking, authority figures, chickens. Lots of people are scared of chickens, apparently, or heights, or spiders, or enclosed spaces, or open spaces, whatever it might be, crowded places, whatever it might be. If you're willing to face the fears in an empowered way, not in a self-derogatory, not in a overly mentally disciplined, just do it and push into it, but in a gentle but wise way, you diminish the control or the influence that those fears have over you. But the fears don't really just go away. I say that because a lot of people are expecting the fears to go away, and then when the fears don't just disappear, they feel that they failed, and therefore they keep identifying as someone who is scared of doing that, which reinforces the narrative. Rather than, if you have an empowered relationship with it, you can still feel the fear, but you're not being influenced by that, right? So I still feel fear around authority, but I'm not being overly influenced by it, right? Unless I'm really tired and certain situations, snowball into a situation where it can trigger a deeper sort of anxiety response, which happens. But that's part of the journey, isn't it? To keep growing our capacity to be more empowered in the world, we have to be willing to stretch ourselves, and that involves going to the edge of where we think we can cope, which isn't never very pleasant for our ego, right? When we feel that we're about to, quote unquote, lose it. But there you go. That's life. It keeps us humble. Keeps us humble to recognise, that we're not all good at everything, and we don't all have the same capacities, and yet we don't need to be defined by that either. So, yeah. What other wisdom? Has anyone got anything they would like to provoke? We're almost done our time. I'm still just finishing off the house. Still haven't quite finished painting the window frames, etc. I've got a couple of new window frames coming because a couple of them were rotten. I'm having them rebuilt, which is a bit of a slow process this time of year, as a lot of places have had holidays. But yes, getting a couple of windows built, I have to replace those frames and paint them up, and I'm just building a new little pergola out the back. So keeping busy, as well as doing my exercise, walking up the hill and going to the gym. Hey, brother Mike, how are you? Getting out in nature as often as I can, really helpful when it's been so intense energy. It really is a very healing place for me when I walk into the bush, and I really enjoy walking fast, I walk slow on the way back, but I walk fast on the way up, because getting my heart rate up and moving energy in the body is really therapeutic for me as well, in terms of feeling good in a body on a planet when it's so extreme. And those of us who are energetically sensitive, of course, have been feeling a lot of this extremeness, a lot of this chaos, because we're empathing it from society around us, no matter how protected we might be from media sources and broadcasts of this and that. We still have to, exist somewhat in society, and that means we feel the energy. And even if we're up in the Himalayas in a cave, we could also be still feeling the energy of the world and the various, intensifications or concerns, fears, angers, frustrations, etc., etc. So those of us who have chosen to work as conduits on this planet, we're having to process a lot of that energy, right? We're having to hold space for it. We're having to feel it, and to do that, you have to look after yourself, because it's not easy to run that sort of that energy. The frequency of the energy at the moment and the amplitude of the energy at this moment is intense, right? These are intensely dense energies, and they're of quite significant power level. So that's it. It's not easy. Mike said, yes, off for a walk calms the farm. Yeah. Nice. Righto, kids. Well, I might as well wrap it up there, right on 9:30. That's probably as good a spot as any. So yeah, look after yourself. Be kind. I just remember, I say this every year, but if you're expecting, just because we're in 2025 now, January is always a shit month. So don't be too expectant on things to be easy to change. You might have made some resolutions or some intentions for yourself around New Year's Eve, etc., as we're liable to do. Made some commitments to changing how your life's playing out, and it might feel like you're failing right now, and that's really, really common. So just be patient. We've got new moon coming up on the whatever it is, end of the month anyway. We've got full moon coming up in a week or so that's much more pressing at the moment. But after that, basically we've got Chinese New Year or Lunar New Year coming up at the end of January. We'll be changing from the fire dragon to the wooden snake in the Chinese astrology system, and that will help usher in, that will further help this transition into newness, into a different state of being to what we have been experienced. So just be patient. Don't allow yourself to get too frustrated or resentful or judgmental on yourself for not being able to change what you want to change right now. Just allow it to be a process. And it's going to, obviously, full moon coming up in another less than a week now, will be intensifying that yet again. Anywho's, that's life. Intensification and challenge after challenge. Much, much love. Bye, friends. Bye-bye.